We all end up repeating our parents' lives, their financial reality, their education levels, the kinds of relationships and the ways they relate, the ways they cope, their health. And even if we had the most amazing parents in the whole world, there are going to be aspects that we do not want to repeat. You're listening to the Science and Spirit of Happy podcast, where we discuss the rational, strategic, and psychological methods, but also the deep reasons and spiritual philosophy behind being happy down to the soul. Happiness isn't just hedonism. It's not even solely personal. Getting happy dramatically increases your effectiveness in every area, from business and finance to relationships. When we align with our own personal version of ideal, we end up not just happier, but healthier, more whole, more successful and richer, but even loving and loved. It's my opinion that getting happy for yourself is the absolute best way to serve the people in your life. I'm your host, Laura Lee Bowers, master healer and academic researcher. And this is another episode diving into the science and spirit of happy, a logical path to soul. G'day, y'all! Welcome back! Oh, we are on season 3 of the Science and Spirit of Happy. And I'm so excited because I've been doing this now for, 6 months. 6 months we've been doing this podcast, and I have to say, I have started multiple online businesses, and this is by far my favorite. This is really what drives me, and I feel like this is really, really aligned with my research, my expertise, but also my focus, right? And the reason that this is my focus kind of comes from that saying where they say that if you do enough personal work, if you really focus on yourself enough, then your mess becomes your message. So I think that this season is really, really pertinent in that I had a really big mess of, parental role models. And that's really become a guiding principle in my life. It's really become my message that you don't need to repeat the mistakes of the past, and you don't need to allow the past that shaped you to dictate your future. And we're going to go into the science of this, and we're going to go into my experience with this, my research, and my methodology, which is estimated to be 10 times more effective than the leading personal development methods. I am talking to you from an island in Thailand right now, which again is pertinent to this discussion because my parents never traveled. My parents always, wanted to travel. And when I was growing up and traveling the world, backpacking before Instagram, people would always tell me that they really wanted to travel too, but they never did. And this is actually my 3rd time living in Thailand. And although my mother has done some traveling, gone on vacations since she retired, one of them was actually to Latin America to visit me because I was also living there. And it isn't just, developing nations that I've lived in either. I am on my way back to living in Australia, one of the most expensive places in the world, for the 3rd time as well. I've also lived in the UK, in London. I lived in Scotland. And, all of that stuff is not something that you would have thought that I would accomplish. And it isn't just about travel either. Maybe I could have lucked out and got, some insight into traveling early on and had some lucky breaks or something to travel perhaps. But, I've also have dramatically different relationships than my parents modeled to me. Dramatically different. I was raised by a single mother. I'm married with a child. I work with my husband. I live with my husband. We're together 24/7. My father was not in the picture really growing up. I had sort of a correspondence relationship with him, but he lived on the other side of the country, and I hardly saw him. My husband takes care of my child probably hour for hour more than I do even. So he's very, very, very present in our family's life. My health is dramatically different from my parents, and my wealth, my level of wealth is dramatically different than my parents, and I am not even, I'm just in the beginning of my career. So I saw this guy on the Rich Roll podcast the other day, and he had come from a place of severe, childhood trauma, and was suffering from substance abuse early on in his life. And now he's in his 40s. He's been sober for, a couple decades. He's a father. He's been married for 17 years. He's an entrepreneur. He's doing financially very, very well. He's very healthy. He said he's 43. He feels like he's 23. And he was saying that if you would have looked at him at 13 and look at what he was enduring, look at what he was going through, what was being modeled to him, right? How he was being shaped, you would never in a million years imagine that he would be where he is now. However, this is the same for everyone, okay? If you walk into a middle-class income home, you're not going to look at the kids and say, oh, you guys are going to make 7 or 8 figures a year. You just aren't going to think that. You're going to think that child is probably going to do a little bit better, a little bit worse than their parents. It's an automatic that we intuitively understand this, and the data backs this up. And this isn't just about trauma. This isn't just about people being treated poorly and then ending up poorly, okay? This is about us just being conditioned to relate to the world in a way that is being modeled to us by our parents. And they shape everything that we are. And I'm going to talk about the studies a little bit later, but the study suggests that, yeah, we just repeat the patterns. This isn't about trauma. It isn't about traumatic experiences. This is about you and who you are and how you want to be and how you want to be better than your parents, which is, it's arguably, or I don't even know if it is arguable, that that's kind of the purpose to living. If you believe in evolution, then we should be progressing, right? Our children should be doing better than we did. And that is, I think, every parent's dream too, is to give their children everything that they didn't have or everything that they wanted, right? It's a constant progress thing. So this is really, really natural, that we want to be better than our parents, and that we want to be maybe dramatically different than them in a lot of ways. If we are really aligned with ourselves and we can feel, our own personal goals and dreams and desires, our purpose, what I would say is your purpose. If we can feel that, then there should be probably some things that you want to be dramatically different than your parents. And when this person was talking, he was empowering people by saying, like, hey, you just need to make this choice. You can choose, to either repeat the patterns of the past, or choose a different approach. And I 100% agree. Like, I was giving this guy high 10s and, telling him to preach on, because I 100% agree. But the statistics show that he's an anomaly. Most people don't escape. And it's just because we don't have the know-how, and we aren't bringing the consciousness to how we don't want to be like our parents, right? And I also think that for, somewhat normal-ish people who had normal-ish experiences, it can be even more challenging to be not like your parents, to be different from your parents. Because when you've had a traumatic experience, you know that something's wrong. You know that something needs to be healed. You know that something needs to be changed. You know that something was not okay. And society will agree with you, and there's all kinds of supports for that kind of thing. But what about somebody who, was just not modeled the kind of life that really aligns with them. That person is going to be told like, oh, well, but your parents are great and there's nothing wrong here. And they're going to feel like something is wrong. They're going to feel like there's a misalignment. They're going to feel like they want something different. And they're not even going to know what to do or where to even look because there just isn't enough information out there. So that brings me to why now? Why am I talking about this now, right? I've just released 2 podcast episodes. I have started personal development businesses helping people with their health goals and with their financial goals. So why now am I talking about specifically how to not be like your parents? Well, there's 2 reasons, okay? There's a professional reason and there's a personal reason. So the professional reason was I was actually doing a branding exercise for the science and spirit of happy, right? Just kind of flushing out like, what do I do? What do I do here? What does the science and spirit of happy do? So the first question that, a mentor will ask when you're doing a branding exercise is like, what problem do you solve, right? What do you solve for? Like drive-throughs solve us not wanting to get out of the car and get our food. We just like drive on through and have somebody just deliver it to a window. That's the problem it solves, right? So what problem does the science and spirit of happy solve? And I thought immediately, well, I help people get to big goals easier, right? I help people align themselves so that they can get to big goals easier than any of the other methods. But like, how do I do that? And why is that different? Like, why am I different? Why are my methods so much more effective? Well, because I heal micro trauma that prevents the goal. And micro trauma is not what you think about when you think of trauma. Okay. Micro trauma is just anything that misaligns you, anything that prevents you from living your purpose fully. So living, that dream life that you want. If you genuinely want that, if you really, really, really genuinely want that, you're not trying to prove a point or trying to get control over somebody else or anything like that. But if you really genuinely want that dream life, I firmly believe that is your part of your purpose. It's a purpose need. And so it speaks to something that is kind of aligned with the rest of reality, and it should be easy for you. And that's what I help people do. I help people heal the microtrauma so it's easy. But it begs the question, like, what does that even mean? Like, well, what am I doing when I'm healing the microtrauma and aligning somebody with their purpose to get to their big goals? Well, I'm stopping the past from recreating itself. Right? So the micro trauma is kind of shaped a person into a certain shape, and then they fit into a certain mold, right? They fit into a certain place in life, and that pattern just continuously repeats itself because the shape stays the same, right? You have developmental experiences that mold you into a certain shape, and then you fit a very specific place in life because that's your shape. So I disrupt the pattern. I reprogram people. We redevelop these parts of ourselves to change the shape. But what does that even do, right? We're doing this branding exercise, like what am I doing? And I realized, well, I help people not be like their parents, or at least help people not be the shape that their parents made them. And all of a sudden, my mind just opened up completely. My very first website, I didn't do anything with it, but I bought the domain, I built the website. My very first website was raisingourselves.com. And now somebody has purchased that website, and you can buy it for the bargain, price of like $5,000 a year. But that was my very first website because I wanted to teach people how to reparent themselves, because that had made such a dramatic impact in my life, right? I am that guy. When that guy was saying, you would never imagine looking at me at 13 years old that I would be where I am now. And the same goes. I mean, my own mother told me that she thought that I would be a drunk in the projects. So that would have been many people's expectations of me if you saw what I was going through when I was 13 years old. You would never imagine that, anything in my life, my relationships, my health, my physical health, definitely not my lifestyle, my career, my education, none of that Nobody would have ever expected this from me. And that comes from reparenting, right? What I would call reparenting-ish. I also joked about writing a book titled How to Not Be Like Your Parents. And it's not a joke now. Like, these little things that sort of pop up in our lives, they can often speak to much bigger truth. It's not a joke now. I've actually written the book. Hopefully it is for sale for a tiny, I think I'm going to sell it for like $5. Hopefully it is for sale by the time that you're watching this. And it will be linked wherever you're watching this. And definitely check that out if you want actual like practical steps and exercises to do to how to not be like your parents and grow in whatever way that you don't want to be like your parents, because it will be more specific given that it's in print. But this is definitely, like, professionally, this has always been what I do. It's always been what I do. I am the person who teaches you how to not be like your parents, how to not be the shape that they wanted you to be, and how to be the shape that you really genuinely are, right? The real you, which is all of your biggest goals and dreams and desires. Sounds pretty great, right? This leads me to the personal reason that I decided to do this season and write a book on how to not be like your parents. One of my parents got an off-the-cuff misdiagnosis from a medical doctor for a personality disorder. In hindsight, asking for help probably negates the kind of personality disorders that they were diagnosed with. But I didn't know anything about mental illness at this point. All I know is that they got this diagnosis. And I did know that I was really unhappy and I was really struggling, right? I had serious issues with anxiety. And that diagnosis was really pivotal to me. It was really pivotal to my understanding and my confidence in my experience that something wrong happened, right? Because what a child always hears when you don't treat them the way that they need to be treated. I'm going to talk a lot about this in this season too. But the messaging that a child gets when they're not treated the way that they want to be treated or they need to be treated is that it's their fault, right? So getting that diagnosis really defined like how wrong things had been and that it wasn't my fault. And that was really, really empowering. But after mentoring people whose parents genuinely had harmful mental illness and seeing these disorders firsthand through their experiences and through my experiences with people's parents who obviously, are mentally ill, it kept showing me that like my parent didn't actually fit that criteria. It just wasn't the same. And after getting a TikTok education in neurodivergence, I personally think and realize that my parent like much better fits the criteria for a neurodivergence than a mental illness. So that really reframed it for me. I've been talking a little bit about trauma. The reason that I didn't go forward with raisingourselves.com is because I didn't want my trauma to become my message. I didn't want that to become my story. And I didn't want to be reliving that over and over and over again. But when I realized that, yes, I had trauma, obviously, but it wasn't necessarily just because of intergenerational trauma coming down, creating, abnormal psychology, etc. It wasn't just that. It was actually that, this person actually was neurodivergent and likely neurodivergent and not diagnosed, not given the support that they needed. Nobody understood how this person's brain actually worked differently than other people. And they didn't intend to do harm. And it wasn't, like a failure to deal with their issues solely. There was actually this other part at play. And that really also brought up the obvious the truth that it doesn't matter whether your parents were absolutely horrible people who intended to do you harm, who were absolutely sick and twisted and sadistic and wanted to harm you or wanted to make you smaller than them and wanted to keep you down so that they could like have some kind of egotistical, supremacy over you. Or, your parents just were full of fear and didn't want you to make bad mistakes, so tried to control your behavior to fit you into a box that was shaped by their fear out of care and concern and just anxiety over you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether, your parent just wasn't the perfect fit for you. That your parent had absolutely no way to understand what you needed because you're just an entirely different kind of person and you needed different kinds of experience and a different kind of relationship. And they maybe even tried their best or it's just, they're just, a product of historicity that the place that they were at in history, the culture at the time, they didn't know. They didn't know that you weren't supposed to, hit your kids or berate them or get them to just obey you, that wasn't developmentally ideal. Whatever situation that you were in, it doesn't matter. Everybody needs the exact same steps to get better. Everybody needs the exact same steps to get aligned. Everybody needs the exact same things in their life to get on the path to creating their goals, their dreams, their vision, and living their purpose. And everyone has some pattern that they want to get over. This isn't like a betrayal to our parents, right? This is everybody, naturally wanting to progress past their parents. And what the research shows us that we stay within one income or wealth quintile. So we either, go up one quintile or down one. Our parents shape how we are parents, how we parent. I've noticed I am a parent. I have a toddler. He's almost 2 years old. And I noticed, especially in infancy, that unconsciously, I think the way that we are treated as infants, like unconsciously comes out to the front of the conscious mind of how we're relating to our infants. Even though I have done so much work with the express intent to be a better parent, all of my research comes down to that. That is exactly, we're talking, 15 years ago, I had a vision of having a better life, which was expressly a better family. And I've been doing all of my research to be a better parent and all of my personal development to be a better parent. And I am like so far from where I came, so far, like unimaginably far. And yet still I had these weird things coming up in my brain from my unconscious. And it actually gave me insight into how I was treated. And the same with my husband. It was like freaky. Not that we acted on, the things that weren't healthy, but it comes right to the forefront of your mind. Like it's still stuck in there because our parents absolutely shape how we parent. I've heard people say you don't know what kind of parent you're going to be until you have a kid because all of a sudden all this stuff just comes out of you and you don't even know where it's from. And I think that is like directly what I'm talking about. Their relationships model the relationships that we will have. So if they have, crappy marriages, divorce, etc., like you're so much more likely. It's almost like a direct, causal link. They shape our attachment styles, and then our attachment styles shape our future relationships. Like it's just so linear. And from the stages of 0 to 3, especially, they teach us how to view ourselves and the whole world. And like it's just without the right approach, 0 to 3, like how are you supposed to go back and rewind and redo this? And it's not that intuitive. And I think that it's something that we really need to talk about because you can absolutely do it. Parents dictate your confidence and your self-esteem, your financial reality, your relationships, and your family life. So, I mean, what aspects of our lives has not, at least in essence, been dictated by our parents, been totally shaped by our parents. And the reverse is true too. This is a continuation, right? Like, what aspect, if our parents shape our confidence and our self-esteem, our financial reality, our relationships, and our family life, like, their parents shape them too. That's why we call it, intergenerational trauma when it's trauma. But what about, just intergenerational patterns? What about just like intergenerational healing? What about creating intergenerational wealth? Your kids can inherit like abundance instead of trauma. We all end up repeating our parents' lives, our relationships, our financial reality. And it doesn't matter if you had the most amazing parents in the world. There's going to be aspects that you don't want to repeat for yourself. And luckily, I actually have a solution for you. And it doesn't matter to what degree your parents like harmed or hindered you. Like, the approach is identically the same. So I just want you to imagine for a second that your self-esteem, that your worldview, that your mindset, the way that you feel about yourself and other people, your relationships, your parenting styles, and your income levels, your level of wealth was dictated by you. If all of those things were dictated by you, like, what would they be? Bam. That is exactly what we can do. We're going to go through step by step because everything I do is like a really linear step-by-step approach. That is just, it's how I operate, being, coming from a scientific background, but it's always holistic, coming from like a very spiritual background as well, and understanding scientifically that you actually need a holistic approach to sustainably get anywhere, and especially to make it easy. I use both things, but it's always very practical and step-by-step and methodical. So I have a methodical kind of 8-step approach where I discuss personal powers that build upon one another that anybody and everybody needs to work on to get to where they want to go. And that's what I'm going to discuss this whole season, are the step-by-step approach. If you want everything right now, get the ebook. Again, it's $5, and we're going to discuss all of the steps, the entire approach, all in one place, as well as provide exercises and practical kind of steps like that, a little bit more than what the podcast is going to explore. So this has been really, really fun. I'm really, really excited about this season, talking about how to not be like your parents and grow into the people that we really want to be. So I will see you in the next episode. Until then, g'day, y'all.